as you were saying.
Talk about, so in Battleship, we have 5 ships, but in marriage, there's really 4 big ships.
Yep.
What are those?
So they call them the big 4, and you've probably all had conflict around these 4. Number 1, the very first thing that the big 4, that conflict comes into marriage is sex, intimacy. Number 2, finances, money. Number 3 is children. Those little guys know how to really bring some things. And the 4th one is work. Work becomes a conflict. And speaking of work, this is probably out of order, my free spirit, but an interesting dynamic with us is not only are you my husband, my best friend, you're my pastor and my boss. And so you can imagine there could be some conflict sometimes when he is all of those things in my life.
But I think, because we don't have it all right.
No.
And know that from the beginning. We don't have it figured out,
just
folks.
ask our staff.
Yes, ask our staff.
We live our marriage out with our staff. Just ask them.
We live our marriage out in front of our staff. And sometimes we have conflict in the office.
Yeah.
She is very strong opinionated. I'm very strongly opinionated. And the struggle is I lean on her so much that sometimes when I know she's right, it aggravates me. Because I don't want her to be right. And
in fact, that brings up another fun story. So that's not in our notes either. It's my free spirit that he loves about me. But when we were dating, do you remember we broke up for a little bit?
Yes. This is dirty. This was, ladies, do not take points from this. This is.
No. So we broke up because I was like, listen, I just don't know if kind of what you're imagining in a person is who I am, and you just kind of, all right, we're cool. And there were some other girls trying to get him, and I'm like, I'm not competitive, and so go ahead. And so I didn't answer his calls for like a couple days, and he's pretty persistent. He probably called me 25 times a minute, and I'm pretty stubborn. And so I didn't answer. And then I think it was it 2 days later or 1 day later? I don't know.
2 days.
2 days later.
You didn't call me on Memorial Day.
Yeah, it was. He even remembers the
went
day.
to a picnic. I knew where you were, and you didn't call me.
Look, he remembers every detail. Any detailed people, and I don't remember that. So he gets me a lot in conflict with the details because I don't remember them. But and then we were sitting down and we were having lunch, and you said something to me, and you said, I've just never dated or met somebody like you. And I think you said, what did you say?
You know who you are.
You know who you are, and sometimes I think you're smarter than me.
Yeah.
I was trying to get him to say it again. But anyways. But we broke up because of that, and then we got back together.
So say this with me, okay? I'm going to teach you this phrase. You and me, say it.
You and me
has become us and we.
Has become us and we.
You and me.
You and me
has become us and we.
Us and we.
It's going to make sense, a little more sense in just a moment, because we're going to give you some rules for conflict, rules of engagement.
Yeah.
We're playing Battleship,
right.
So rules of engagement. Rule number 1, assess the damage prior to launch. So if you are in conflict and your tempers are flaring and emotions are high, that verbal missile is getting ready to leave your mouth.
Right.
You need to assess the damage prior to launching that missile.
Yeah.
How much damage is this going to cause?
Right.
There has been, now listen, we have counseled people who have been in physically abusive relationships,
Yeah.
and it's horrible. Equally as horrible is people who are in emotionally and verbally abusive relationships.
Absolutely.
Missiles, verbal missiles, can hurt sometimes as much as fist. In fact, you'll probably recover quicker from a hit with a fist than you will with a hit with the words. And sometimes, now look, and I'm going to tell you this story. We're being really authentic here today. Before I tell you this story and you hate me, understand, this was the most innocent thing I've ever done.
If you're pregnant, Julie, cover your ears.
This was the most innocent thing I've ever done. I did not mean this the way it came out. And as it was coming out, it was one of those moments, those out-of-body experiences where you could actually see the words coming out of your mouth. You know what I'm talking about? And thankfully, my wife knows me, so she wasn't upset at it. She knows I was simple-minded in this. So she was probably about 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant with Rush. And she was thinking about how I'm going to lose the baby weight after she has the baby.
Yeah,
now,
if
you know me, all I do is watch documentaries. I watch documentaries every night. I'm constantly want to learn something. Well, I've been watching this whole documentary on the ocean, okay? And they had this whole segment on whales. And I know it's awful. It is horrible. And Kim's talking about losing weight, and it just popped in my mind. I said, well, they say that a whale can lose, I forget how many thousands of calories a day through nursing.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something you should consider. To which she looks at me and says, did you just call me a whale? And I went,
True.
oh God, abort, 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 abort. Now that was innocent, and we get a big laugh out of it, hopefully.
No, we do. But I think the reason we can laugh like that is I know what he truly thinks of me, because he is so wonderful at telling me how beautiful I am, how all of these awesome, he is wonderful affirming me. So I already know when he's saying that, he's not really thinking I'm a whale. But if he wouldn't have had all of that back history, it would have put a self-doubt in my head, because he wouldn't have had all this change where he had affirmed me. So we kind of can joke about things because he is so wonderful about applauding me.
Here's one thing you'll learn about marriage. Marriage, and we're going on 13 years? 14? 14 years. Wow. 14 years. I won't forget it in the second service. 14 years of marriage. And one of the things we've learned about marriage is that marriage is the process of collecting intimate data.
Yeah.
So over 14 years, we have learned intimate details about each other.
Right.
During the good times, we share. Here's what I'm afraid of. Here's where I'm insecure. Here's what I struggle with. Here's where I don't feel like I'm enough. Here's where I don't feel like I measure up. We share that in the good times. But if you're not careful, and I wrote this down, when we feel like we're losing, we use that intimate data that was shared in trust to hurt or wound our spouse. So we don't listen in the good times because we care. We listen because we're gathering intel.
Yeah.
So I know where to hit you when we're angry.
Right.
So what's that going to do? When a good time we're sharing intimate detail, intimate data, but now we get into a conflict, we get into an argument, and I use that intimate knowledge that she shared with me in good times, but I use it to wound her in the difficult times. It's going to hinder her from sharing any intimate details with me in the future.
Yeah.
Because one thing you learn about, just look at the world. Look at the world. We're at peace right now, right? We're at peace, but we're still loaded up with missiles.
Right.
So what happens is, if you use that intimate data during conflict, you never truly let your guard down in times of peace. So even though you can be in a time of peace, you're still fully ready for war.
That's right. And when you, I'll say one thing. We have never counseled a struggling marriage that has a great sex life. And we're not going to go into that. But to be intimate with one another, that's what we're talking about. Intimacy. To be able to be vulnerable with one another. And that is where the enemy likes to hit and likes to stop. Because if he can stop the verbal, so women verbally, that's how we see intimacy. It's sharing, giving you a part of ourselves. And men, intimacy is more sex. But if the enemy can stop that and put a breach there, we have never, we have never counseled or talked to anybody that's come to us and said, man, we're really struggling in our marriage. And we ask them one question: how often are you having sex? And never is it, oh, all the time, it's great. And
Never.
their marriage is struggling.
Never.
It goes together, and it's intimacy. So that's so important. And that's why we're talking about assess the damage. Do you really want to have to put all this back together because of one misguided missile?
One verbal missile can undo 20 acts of kindness.
That's a study, yes.
One verbal. This was a study. So let me explain this to you. I was going to eat it. I'm not going to eat
He
it.
tried to talk me into eating it. I'm not eating that on stage.
So this Kit Kat, if I were to eat this entire Kit Kat, let's see, calories, 420 calories.
Oh, my.
420 calories in this Kit Kat. Now, I could sit down and eat this whole Kit Kat, and I could do it probably in less than a minute. But since I've been running, it would take me 35 minutes of running in order to burn off a Kit Kat that it took me 1 minute to eat.
True.
This is like a verbal missile. One verbal missile can undo 20 acts of kindness and 20 acts of goodness.
That's right.
Husbands, remember, this is a word to the husbands in the room, or future husbands. Your wife is a field and you are a farmer. She is designed to reproduce what I sow into her. We understand that in the natural. We don't understand it in the spiritual. She will reproduce whatever I sow into her. The Bible teaches us is that our words are seed. So whatever I sow into her, that's what she's going to reproduce for me.
Right.
So I want to make sure I'm sowing into her beauty, sowing into her, you're the most intelligent. Nothing compares to you. No one gets my attention like you get my attention. You're the smartest woman I know, the wisest woman I know, the greatest woman I know. And I'm sowing that into her constantly, because guess what? I'm ultimately going to reap whatever it is I sow into her.
Absolutely.